É o
Hello, nice to meet you.
Comment ça?
Je vous dis quand je suis prêt.
D'accord. Bonjour à tous.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Bonjour, vous entendez quelque chose?
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Non? Monsieur, les micros. Les micros. Les micros. Ça y est, ça marche? Bonjour à tous. Bonjour à tous.
Good afternoon.
Prie de
I'd like to invite you to take your seats. We'll be beginning shortly.
Messieurs, dames,
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Please take your seats. We're about to begin.
nous allons commencer l'événement. Je vous prie de...
We are about to begin this event. Please take your seats.
We are about to start. Please take your seats, ladies and gentlemen. For the invited, for the guests who need interpretation, please take your headphones. If you don't have, they are in the back. Pour ceux qui ont besoin d'interprétation,
For those who need interpretation,
des appareils
please use your interpreting headsets,
au fond de la salle.
which you can find at the back of the room. We will be starting shortly.
Bonjour, bonsoir à toutes.
Good afternoon.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all. Buenos días, buenas tardes, buenas noches a todos. Je voudrais préciser d'emblée
I would like to say from the outset that interpretation is available in French, English and Spanish. And this event is held at the headquarters of UNESCO in person, but we will also have speakers online, and the event is also being broadcast live on social media. Once again, welcome to all of you to this celebration about life. I am the Interim Director of the Science of Ecology and the Earth sector and the MAB Programme of UNESCO. It's a great honour and pleasure to welcome you today and to moderate this session, which marks the 50th anniversary of the Man and the Biosphere Programme. This event is articulated around topics which are important to the MAB programme, such as research, cultural diversity and biological diversity, international cooperation, and solidarity among generations and people. This event will be closed by the launch on the portal on water quality in the Lake Chad Basin, which is the result of a project that we have been carrying out in this very disadvantaged area. This presentation will be followed by a reception. We will have a short break between 3 p.m. and 6:30 p.m. and you are invited to join us again at 6:30 p.m. in this same room for the reception, which is organized by the Government of Nigeria and UNESCO. Without further ado, we'll now start the opening ceremony. I would therefore like to invite the Deputy Director of UNESCO to make his opening remarks. President of the General Conference, Chair of the Man in the Biosphere Programme Council, Madam Minister for Education of the Sultanate of Oman, Excellencies, Ambassadors, dear colleagues and guests, ladies and gentlemen. 50 years ago, 1 year before the United Nations Conference on the Environment in Stockholm, 1 year before the Meadows Report, which is called Halte à la Croissance in French, visionary men and women came together at UNESCO to found the Man and the Biosphere Programme. We know that humans are responsible for the alteration of 75% of land ecosystems, 50% of waterways, and 40% of marine ecosystems. This was confirmed by the first global assessment report on the state of biodiversity, launched by Apes at UNESCO in 2019. It is therefore vital for us to rethink our models of development and our relationship with the living world. Local and indigenous people are the guardians of 80% of ecosystems, and they have so much to teach us about this. In fact, this is the model that MAB has been promoting ever since it was created. And now, 50 years down the line, this model is no longer theoretical, because since then, 727 biosphere reserves have been created as part of the MAB programme in over 130 countries, covering 5% of the Earth's landmass, which are home to 275 million people. The accumulated experience of those living in these lands is immense and will be a precious resource to us in the fight to address the major challenges of humankind, which are climate change, declining ocean health, and biodiversity collapse. This experience also gives us a tool to contribute to achieving the goals of the post-2020 biodiversity framework, which will be adopted at the COP15 in Kunming in 2022. This is why UNESCO is particularly proud to be celebrating the 50th anniversary of MAB today. This is a programme which has been supported by the enthusiasm of scientists, associations, NGOs, local and indigenous communities, but also the political will of our member states who every year propose new sites for inscription. The MAB programme embodies the very essence of international scientific cooperation for biodiversity. It also fosters environmental conservation for peace through projects such as the Biosphere and Heritage of Lake Chad project, BioPalt, which aims to restore the environmental heritage of the region, whilst also developing sustainable revenue-generating activities for local people, including women. Last but not least, the MAB shows a willingness to ensure that the accumulated experience of all stakeholders is transmitted from one generation to the next. And in this respect, I wish to thank Dr Jane Goodall, Sebastião Salgado, Chef Mauro Calogreco, Anthony Johnston, Michel Baudouin, and our 6 youth spokespeople for having agreed to take part in this ceremony as part of an intergenerational dialogue. This celebration of the 50th anniversary of the MAB is an even greater occasion today, because it's also an opportunity to award the UNESCO Sultanate Prize for Environmental Conservation. This was made possible thanks to a generous donation made 30 years ago by His Majesty Sultan Qaboos bin Said of Oman. This prize will be awarded in a few moments to the Forest Research Institute of Malaysia, which plays an essential role in the management, conservation, and sustainable use of tropical forests. And it will also be awarded to the University for International Cooperation of Costa Rica, which has made an outstanding contribution to the capacity building of protected area managers, as well as the regeneration of endangered natural areas in Latin America and the Caribbean. These are two outstanding examples of commitments to biodiversity for the planet and for future generations.
Ladies and gentlemen, living together in harmony with the planet is the future we want. This idea underpins UNESCO's biodiversity strategy, and it is at the basis of the piece of art created by the renowned Brazilian contemporary artist and UNESCO Goodwill Ambassador, Mr. Vik Muniz. Which features images and fabrics submitted by dozens of UNESCO Biosphere Reserves. I am delighted that Mr. Vik Muniz is with us today, not only to participate in the intergenerational dialogue, but also to present us with this unique work of art that he donates to UNESCO on this auspicious occasion of the 50th anniversary of the MAB, and that we will unveil in a few minutes. This year, we are not only celebrating the 50 years of MAB, it is also a year for the ocean, as we opened the United Nations Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development, and a year for the ecosystems in danger, as we launched the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration. Many other important milestones lie ahead of us, and this 50th anniversary of MAB aims to be a celebration and a launch pad for other major events. We will maintain this momentum at the second part of the COP15 Biodiversity in Kunming, and also at the UN Ocean Conference in Lisbon, both in 2022. I am particularly pleased that young people from the MAB program are leading the way and are accompanying us in this celebratory journey, because they are our planet's future, but they are also our present. Lastly, I would like to conclude with the words of Dr. Jane Goodall, the spokesperson of the 50th anniversary of the MAB program, which I quote, "One individual cannot possibly make a difference alone. It is individual efforts collectively that makes a noticeable difference, all the difference in the world. UNESCO will play its part by making the difference, by making the defense of biodiversity not only a technical and scientific issue, but also an ethical and humanist one." Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, DDG, for this very inspiring words. Now, may I invite the President of the Conference General, the Ambassador of Republic of Brazil, Mr. Santiago Irazabal Mourão, to give us his speech. Excellency, the floor is yours.
Dear Shishu Deputy Director General, Mr. Adeboju Adesola, Chair of the ICC, Madam the Minister of Education of the Sultanate of Oman, my good representative of Brazil, Ambassador of Goodwill, Vik Muniz, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very pleased to participate in my capacity as President of the 41st General Conference in the celebration of the 50th anniversary of the program Man and Biosphere MAB. The relevance of this program has not aged one day. I would even say that it's more necessary today than ever. The MAB is at the heart of UNESCO contribution to the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. The program is about the protection of nature, but it is also about the search for harmonious relationship between the humanity and the environment, providing a unique platform for collaboration on the loss of biodiversity, climate change, and sustainable development. Today, the World Network of Biosphere Reserves has more than 700 sites across the world, including, and this is important, 22 transboundary sites. Biosphere reserves are places to make the most of human ingenuity, not to provoke destruction, but to protect ecosystems, to find innovative solutions, to adapt to innovative solutions adapted to local realities based on a solidarity and on respect. This requires interdisciplinary approaches, linking the different UNESCO domains of competence, education, culture, science, and communication, drawing on traditional knowledge systems as well as more connected science and technologies. One of the main lessons of these programs is that it does not depend only on states. It demonstrates that if we wish to consolidate peaceful and sustainable societies, we need to engage all actors, civil society, private sector, and young people. This is about ownership. This is about our responsibility to act as responsible citizens. This is why I'm delighted that a Brazilian artist and UNESCO Goodwill Ambassador, Vik Muniz, used his talent to relay a strong message related to the protection of the UNESCO man and the biosphere. Vik Muniz is not just a great visual artist. He's actively engaged to show the impact of human action on our environment and make of art an inclusive tool for changing mindsets about vulnerable populations. Today, and we will see that in a few minutes, today he's donated to UNESCO an artwork composed by different photos and canvases from different biosphere reserves across the world. I thank Dr. Muniz for giving this gift to UNESCO that will now be part of its art collection. Through this art collection, this artwork, you are reminding us that one of the greatest missions of this house, that is the house indeed of culture of the United Nations system, is toward fostering the protection of biodiversity and environment as the only way to build a sustainable and creative future. Thank you very much. Muito obrigado.
Thank you. Thank you very much, His Excellency. May I now request Mr. Chair of the MAB ICC, Professor Adesola Adepoju, to give us his introductory speech.
Excellencies, the DDG of UNESCO, the President General of the General Conference, the Honorable Minister of Education of Oman, the UNESCO Goodwill Ambassador Vik Muniz, the Permanent Delegation of Nigeria to UNESCO, and other excellencies here present, the regional representative of MAB Youth from the 5 regions. Ladies and gentlemen, it is with great pleasure and honor that I welcome you all to this occasion of celebration of the 50th MAB anniversary, as well as the launching of the UNESCO Global Portal on water quality monitoring in the Lake Chad Basin Biopart project. The MAB Biosphere Programme is one of the oldest and most important United Nations educational, scientific, and cultural organization UNESCO research programs dedicated to the relationship between humans and the environment and to sustainable use of natural resources. Today, we are celebrating the 75th anniversary of the existence of UNESCO, as well as the 50th anniversary of MAB programs. This called for not only celebration, but also reflection of the achievements and lessons learned so far in fostering the harmonious integration of man and the natural environment. Today, we cannot talk of 2030 action targets and post-2020 global biodiversity framework without mentioning the integrated and interconnected biodiversity inclusive contribution of Biosphere Reserves. In the same vein, the proactive and resource-oriented approach and impact of the UNESCO Biosphere and Heritage of Lake Chad Biopart multidisciplinary project, particularly aimed at promoting culture of peace, preserving culture and biological diversity, and sustainable managing natural resources in the Lake Chad Basin is commendable. Lake Chad is an important area with great potentials and prospects in terms of terrestrial and aquatic biological diversity, economic opportunities, hydrological dynamics, as well as natural and cultural heritage. The area used to be Africa's largest water reservoir in the Sahel region, with great opportunity for cooperation, important regional assets, and sub-regional integration. Unfortunately, all the promising potentials and prospects of the area are glories of the past, as the basin is shrinking at an alarming rate, consequently resulting in significant imbalances and weakened ecosystem. The innovative scientific tool of UNESCO Water Quality Portal that we are launching today is apt and timely. The conservation and development of the project within the framework of UNESCO Biopart project and other collaborative stakeholders is a laudable initiative at this point. This is an established nexus between water quality and human health, gender equality, poverty alleviation, food security, sustainable livelihood, and ecosystem conservation, as well as economic and social development of the societies. As such, improving water quality, understanding the quality and ecological state of the water resources, monitoring the trend and evolution of water quality and pollution, and assessing anthropogenic and climate change impacts of water resources, especially within the context of Lake Chad Basin, has become expedient in ensuring sustainable water resources management, human health, ecosystem integrity, and sustainable development. This will further translate to fulfillment and implementation of many targets of the UN 2030 Sustainable Development Goal, SDGs. Excellencies, distinguished personalities, regional representative of MAB Youth Forum, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you and I leave you with these words. Harmonious coexistence of human and nature is not a matter of choice anymore, but a matter of necessity because it's all about life. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Professor Adepoju, Chair of the MAB ICC. And thank you all, Excellencies, for all your inspiring words, which really set the scene and set what is MAB about. And MAB is about life. MAB is about all life on Earth, and MAB is about people. When reflecting on how we could represent the essence of the 50th anniversary, we proposed Mr. Vik Muniz, UNESCO Goodwill Ambassador, to design an original piece of work at this occasion. He accepted, and we are immensely grateful to him. Thank you, sir. Mr. Vik Muniz is born in Sao Paulo, Brazil, but he currently works both in Rio de Janeiro and in New York City. His work is displayed in most influential museums of the world. He was designated UNESCO Goodwill Ambassador in 2011 due to his activism for sustainable development as well as use of art education for social inclusion and sustainability. In 2010, a documentary on Muniz's work is one of the world's largest garbage dumps, Wasteland, was nominated to the Academy Awards of the Best Documentary Feature at the 83rd Academy Awards. On Earthworks, he sought to show the direct human impact on nature. Mr. Muniz is with us today, and please help me to warmly welcome him on the stage with the presentation of his artwork. But first of all, Mr. Muniz, I invite you on the stage to give us some word. Thank you.
I would like to address everyone here present today, the DDG, all of the UNESCO staff who have given me this privilege. It's a great privilege for me to have been chosen to create the image that I'm going to present to celebrate the 50th anniversary of this very important institution within UNESCO. I'm going to now switch to English.
Because I made really important finds, discoveries this morning. I discovered first that I don't own a necktie. And the second is that I should have prepared a speech. What you're about to see is a mosaic. It's not a mosaic like the ones you find in the walls of Ravenna or in Venice or in Palermo. It's a different mosaic. It's a photo mosaic. It's a mosaic. It's a contemporary type of mosaic. I've always been fascinated by mosaics because when you look at one of these pieces that I've just mentioned, sometimes you fail to imagine the fact that each stone that is part of that image comes from a different place. Sometimes from a different area, sometimes from a different city, a different state, sometimes even from a different country altogether. If you talk about glass mosaics, the pigments that are in the glass pieces, they may come from all corners of the world. And indeed, when they're together, that make an image that's singularly perceived as a conveyor of meaning. I find mosaics interesting because they are these epistemological tools that help us connect parts to the whole. Whenever you think about, what makes an artwork is made out of parts. And I keep thinking it's similar to the fact that we are here trying to discuss meaning about the world. You know, we're sort of parts of this intricate mosaic. We come from all over, and we are together now trying to make sense out of things. I think the artwork similarly was constructed in this way. I was asked to make something that represented, it was a challenge because it was also to represent diversity. And how can you make a mosaic that creates an image emphasizing the meaning of each part? It was a challenge also because we didn't have access to the material parts, to the physical parts. And because of the situation that we've been living the last 2 years, I had to rely on images that were sent to me. But indeed, we managed to accomplish a lot. I was presented with over 1,000 images from 20 bio reserves, you know, over 25 locations, you know. And putting this thing together, then I had to find an image that would represent it. And I kept thinking about every single thing that could possibly symbolize, you know, the scope of this event. And I could not come with anything until one moment that I looked at the vase of flowers that was right in front of me. And I realized that beauty is something that is a universal knowledge, perhaps the most profound form of intelligence. And I chose to represent and something, I chose to create an image that would represent and to encompass, you know, UNESCO's MAB Biosphere Programme, with just flowers but not cut, natural flowers from the ground, from an image of underappreciated, I would say, for most Canadian artist Tom Thompson. You know, he created this in 1915, an old image, but I love it so much, and I thought it would be a great addition to this event. I might say a few other things. You know, I'm an artist, and I feel a little odd talking to you here today. And I think the importance of art has to be always emphasized in situations like this, because art is the evolution of the interface between mind and matter, between consciousness and phenomenon. Art happens in this very, very thin area where what's inside of us connects with what's outside of us. It's a very interesting definition, but it's perhaps incomplete, because you can say, for two reasons, you know. One says you can say the same thing about science and religion, but also because one may argue that any animal possesses this. It's not an art, you know, it's just intelligence. Any organism that connects to the environment and reacts to it is intelligent. It's everything that is alive presently knows something. It has some kind of knowledge, otherwise it wouldn't be alive. And what differentiates our species from any other in the planet is the fact that we not only know things, but also we believe in things. Belief is what makes us different from any other species in the planet. The fact that we may relate to places that we cannot see right now, that we can think of things that happened before we were born, and can think of things that will happen long after we're, you know, gone. Belief is something that was produced, was engineered to create a better interface between us and the natural environment. So much that we presently dominate this environment. We can actually see stars that are moving apart from each other at 2/3 of the speed of light at the beginning of time. And to be able to see these things, we use something, telescopes that we dug from the ground. Man is indeed a marvelous, marvelous species. And right now, it's interesting, we're at this crossroads that the same structures that helped us dominate this environment with our belief, now, they cloud our senses. They separate us from reality somehow, because we want to believe more than we want to know. And knowing is hard these days. And I commend UNESCO for this 50-year effort. It's a pioneering effort, and I hope it succeeds and it just increases and improves, because one thing that we need more than anything now is first an ecology of mind. We want to be able to see the world, sense it, smell it, touch it, as we once did, beyond the cloud of theories and beliefs, and be attached to facts and scientific knowledge. I thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to present this work for you today, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I enjoyed doing it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Muniz. Now I invite DDG of UNESCO and Mr. Vik Muniz to reveal to us the art of works that he has described with so touching words. Please.
Okay.
1, 2, 3.
I invite you all later to come and see each piece and see what it represents. From far away, it's just a bouquet of flowers. But when you come, you see pieces of every single Biosphere Reserve that was sent to us. It's quite a trip. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Muniz, for your dedication to UNESCO mandate and UNESCO values. And we are very proud at the MAB Programme that you have donated this piece of art, which is unique for the 50th anniversary of the MAB Programme. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let's move to the next sequence of this celebration. Since 1991, the UNESCO Sultan Qaboos Prize of Environmental Conservation has awarded outstanding contributions by individuals, groups of individuals, institutes or organizations in the management of the preservation of the environment. In conjunction with this 50th anniversary of the MAB Programme, we are also honored to celebrate today the 30th anniversary of the Sultan Qaboos Prize and the continued efforts to protect the environment for generations to come. With this regard, I'm very honored to welcome Dr. Madia bint Hamed bin Nasser al-Shibaniha, Minister of Education of Oman, to deliver her speech. Excellencies, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good evening to everyone. Mr. Deputy Director General, Chair of the MAB International Coordinating Council, Mr. Vik Muniz, UNESCO Goodwill Ambassador, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. I'm honored to convey to you the greetings of His Majesty Sultan Haytham bin Tariq, the Sultan of Oman, and his best wishes for the success of the 41st session of the UNESCO General Conference. Over the past 75 years, UNESCO has succeeded in preserving and conveying the best of our shared humanity, bringing people together through mutual understanding and promoting cross-cultural dialogue. Through its multidisciplinary mandate, UNESCO has actively promoted quality education by empowering people with the knowledge and the skills to live in dignity and to contribute to society while successfully spearheading the role of culture as a cornerstone in development policies, as well as promoting the construction of resilient communities by supporting countries in strengthening their scientific and technological capacities, as well as addressing issues such as climate change, water security, sustainable use of ecosystems. Today, I would like to take this opportunity to acknowledge the 50th anniversary of the Man and the Biosphere Programme, MAB, and its pivotal role in connecting people to nature through environmental research, knowledge transfer, and the promotion of education for sustainable development. Ladies and gentlemen, all of our ecosystems that make up our environment are deeply connected, and ensuring their sustainability for the future of the planet is vital. Therefore, protecting the environment must be a top priority in our national strategies and programs. This will undoubtedly contribute to limiting the loss of biodiversity and reducing the negative effects of climate change and global warming. Last week, the UN Climate Change Conference of State Parties, COP26, took place in the United Kingdom, bringing together parties to accelerate the goals of the Paris Agreement and the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, recognizing that climate change is the biggest threat to the planet, and to avert this crisis, countries need to work together urgently. Furthermore, the 2021 World Environment Celebration themed Restoring the Ecosystem has been the largest annual event by the United Nations, demonstrating the global commitment to the conservation of ecosystems and calling for urgent action to restore these systems via the adoption of effective conservation measures. Ladies and gentlemen, the Sultanate of Oman is committed to the preservation and protection of the environment and has continued to adopt a comprehensive policy in this regard to ensure that the environment remains at the forefront of development. His Majesty Sultan Haytham bin Tariq has issued clear directives to assure that maintaining environmental sustainability is a priority for the Sultanate of Oman's future vision, Oman 2040. The vision aims to develop effective and resilient ecosystems to protect the environment and ensure sustainability of natural resources, with an emphasis on renewable energy alternatives to protect Oman's unique environment. The objective being to harmonize environmental, economic, and social requirements in line with the Sustainable Development Goals. Excellencies, it is a great pleasure to celebrate with you the 32nd anniversary of the announcement of the UNESCO Sultan Qaboos Prize for Environmental Conservation. This prestigious prize was established in 1989 during the visit of the late Sultan Qaboos to UNESCO. Over the past 3 decades, it has been awarded to laureates from over 20 countries around the world, in Africa, Asia, Australia, Europe, and Latin America, in recognition of their outstanding contributions towards environmental management and protection, and their coordination and great efforts for the preservation of biosphere reserves, global geoparks, and natural world heritage sites. The UNESCO Sultan Qaboos Prize continues to support international efforts in the field of environmental conservation, recognizing the significant contribution to the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. In this special edition, we are pleased to extend our appreciation and warm congratulations to the laureates of the 2021 UNESCO Sultan Qaboos Prize for Environmental Conservation, which was granted equally to the Forest Institute, Malaysia, for its initiatives in monitoring and preserving the endangered species of national interest, and the documentation of the traditional knowledge and indigenous peoples' local communities. The University for International Cooperation, Costa Rica, for its support to create new biosphere reserves in Latin America, and the promotion of regenerative practices in the biosphere reserves. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank everyone for attending this event, and my sincere gratitude to UNESCO and the MAB for their commended professionalism in the management of the prize over the past 32 years. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Excellency, for your words. Now I am delighted to call the representative of the laureate of the Sultan Qaboos Prize 2021 to receive the prize from the hands of our UNESCO DDG and from the Minister of Education of Oman. So please, I have the pleasure to call upon the representative of the Forest Futures Institute of Malaysia. Please come here so you can. Congratulations for our award winners. And now I would like to ask the representative of FRIN from Malaysia to come and give us some words. Please, Director.
Thank you. Okay, Madam Minister of Education of Oman, Deputy Director General UNESCO, Excellencies, distinguished heads of state and governments, ladies and gentlemen. It is my great honor for me to be here on behalf of the Forest Research Institute Malaysia, FRIM, to receive this UNESCO Sultan Qaboos Prize for Environmental Conservation together with UCI of Costa Rica. I would like to express my sincere appreciation to the members of the prize jury and Madam Director General of UNESCO for selecting FRIM as one of the prize winners for 2021. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce FRIM. FRIM was founded in 1929 as a research branch under a forestry department where the research activities were conducted mainly to ascertain the suitable tropical timber species for producing railway sleepers. FRIM became a statutory body governed by a board of directors in 1985 and is under the Malaysian Ministry of Energy and Natural Resources. From basic research on forest product, today, FRIM research areas have expanded to cover on biodiversity, forest biotechnology, natural products, climate change, and social forestry. FRIM conducts documentation of Malaysia biodiversity to conserve endangered and other species of national interest, including the traditional knowledge of indigenous peoples and local communities, while helping the country to fulfill its commitment to the Convention on Biological Diversity and other environmental agreements. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, as a foreign research institute located within an urban area, FRIMS incorporate not only environmental but also social elements into our services and promotes public awareness on the importance of forest conservation. FRIMS also opens its doors to visitors for recreation and ecotourism activities. In fact, FRIMS is one of the top ecotourism destinations in the state of Selangor. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, in 2009, FRIMS was gazetted as a natural heritage site and officially declared as a national heritage in Malaysia in 2012. At present, FRIMS is working towards attaining the recognition as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. We were included in the tentative list in 2017 and targeting to submit our nomination in 2 to 3 years' time. On this, I hope winning this award and having the opportunity to be here will help FRIMS to promote the importance of forestry research as well as FRIMS nomination for the UNESCO World Heritage Site. Once again, on behalf of FRIMS and my beloved country, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Director. Now I call upon the representative of the Universidad para la Cooperación Internacional in Costa Rica.
Thank you very much. In honor to my country, I'm going to speak in Spanish. Señor Director General Adjunto,
Deputy Director General, President of the General Conference,
Señora Ministra de Educación de
Minister of Education of Oman,
Señor Delegado Permanente
Permanent Delegate
de la UNESCO,
of Costa Rica to UNESCO,
Directora del Programa MAB,
Director of the MAB Programme, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen.
recibo hoy este premio en representación de toda la
It's an honor to be here to receive this prize on behalf of the global educational community of the University for International Cooperation in Costa Rica. We received this prize with commitment and enthusiasm as a recognition of the work undertaken over the past 27 years, led by women and men who've contributed through their various roles and worldviews, with a strong commitment to building a more prosperous world through education. Humankind is facing a planetary crisis caused by our own action. The loss of biodiversity and climate change threaten our life on Earth. The great challenge ahead of us is not technological. It comes from the heart. It's time to reinvent ourselves, to find ourselves once again, to see ourselves once again as part of a community of planetary life, reconnecting with the wisdom of nature. I'm very grateful to the many people and organizations who've studied, worked, supported and funded programs and projects developed by the university. I'd like to thank each and every one of them. Thanks to them, the UCI was able to have a wide-ranging impact in Latin America, the Caribbean and beyond. I'd like to thank UNESCO and MAB for the support that they've always provided in our work with Biosphere Reserves and World Heritage Sites. I'd also like to thank His Majesty Sultan Qaboos for his support through this prize, which will allow us to strengthen our scholarship program. The University for International Cooperation is committed to continue working to advance biodiversity conservation, to move towards a new regenerative development paradigm in which prosperous societies will flourish in harmony with the biosphere. Thank you very much.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Excellencies. And once again, congratulations to the winners. We are now done with the second part of our program, and I will shift in French now. Célébrer la vie. C'est aussi célébrer.
It's about life. That means celebrating generations and all of the men, women, and youth who have been on this planet for so many generations. Now I have the honor of passing the baton on to Max Bale, Director of Planet Radio of the RFI, and Gaël Flauger, who is the person responsible of programs at EPOP Network, who will be animating this part of the session. I'll just leave a few moments so that the DDG can attend his other commitments. We thank you for your presence today.
Donc, je vais passer la parole à...
Now I'll give the floor to Mr. Max Bale.
Bonjour à tous.
Good afternoon. I have a very loud voice. As you can probably hear, I work on the radio. I have the great responsibility today of leading the events as part of the 50th MAB anniversary, a program which was initiated in 1971 by UNESCO. So today I'd really like us to engage in discussions and dialogue to try and identify together the major causes of this fracture that we've seen between humans and nature, so that we can try to think of solutions for a sustainable reconciliation. It's quite ambitious, I know. We'll be dividing it up into several different parts with 2 intergenerational dialogues. 4 speakers will be taking part in these discussions. The reconciliation of humans and nature is the key and guiding principle of MAB, and in fact, the only possible way that we can hope to offer a future to our children and to humankind. To address these issues, we have 2 interactive panels. So we'll have speakers who'll be sat in front of you, chatting, talking naturally, as you would do in your living room or in an informal setting. So what we're trying to do is to share experiences and views on 2 major questions, which are firstly, what is the place of human beings within the living world? And secondly, which tools do we have to move from individual awareness to a collective transition? Because I'm sure you're aware, sometimes we want to do things individually, but it takes a lot more to initiate a collective level transition. Let me just remind you that this event will be broadcast on RFI Planet Radio and also on the UNESCO networks. So first of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Max Bale, and I'm the director of RFI Planet Radio, which is a cooperative initiative of Radio France International. You may have already listened to our radio station. We operate in 16 different languages. And our aim is to cooperate with local and indigenous communities in remote areas. Now, today we're here all together to share our experiences and our views on this cross-cutting topic. I agreed to take part in this event today to share my experience. In fact, over the past 25 years, I've traveled the world, visiting many of the most remote places in the world and working with indigenous local communities. I worked with the Twa and the Baka in Central Africa, but also the Rivi and the Piroa in the Amazon region. And all of this work has shown me that despite the best ambitions of some of us, humans seem to ignore or turn a blind eye to the danger of facing them. And we've actually turned into a super predator as regards our natural environment and others. So what we need today is reconciliation. No other alternative can be acceptable if we want to continue living sustainably together. We'll be dividing up these discussions into 3 parts. There'll be 2 intergenerational discussions to my left, and we'll close the session with an interactive session. I have lots of speakers over there waiting to take the floor, and we'll be discussing everything that's been mentioned during the intergenerational discussions. Now, I'll just ask Noeline to explain perhaps in a bit more detail what the MAB programme is, what the achievements have been over the past 5 decades, the past 50 years. Noeline, you have the floor. And I'll be back in just a few moments. Thank you very much, Max. Ladies and gentlemen, I think the speeches we heard this morning have given us quite a detailed overview of what MAB is. The DDG discussed it at great length, and I'd like to give you, in 4 points, the main achievements of this programme. We all know that the MAB programme is 50 years old now. It was created in 1971. To better understand the relationship between humans and nature, and to lay the scientific foundations to ensure that the conservation of nature and human development are part of a virtuous cycle. The MAB programme, back in 1971, already laid out the foundations for sustainable development before the 1972 Stockholm Convention, the anniversary of which we'll be celebrating next year. So what is the MAB Biosphere Programme? Well, it's a scientific programme with 13 research projects, one of which, project number 8, aimed to establish sites where the ideas of MAB could be applied. That was the premise of the Biosphere Reserve concept. And it should be noted that this project number 8, initiated in 1971, which was one among 13, 50 years down the line has truly become the backbone of the MAB programme. So we've seen a shift from a scientific programme initiated in 1971 to a programme which has a human-centered approach. The MAB programme has continued to be relevant with the passing of time, and it continues to find local solutions to social issues because humans are really at the heart of the MAB programme. Humans' interaction with nature have really supported this programme over the past 50 years. Another aspect I wanted to highlight is that today the network of Biosphere Reserves has 727 sites in 131 countries with 22 transboundary sites. It covers 5% of the land mass, and 275 million people live in these Biosphere Reserves. It's a huge network, and it's a fantastic platform for international, national and local cooperation. and it aims to foster environmental change as well as socio-economic development while respecting local traditions and culture. The World Network of Biosphere Reserves aims to find local responses to global issues such as biodiversity loss, climate change, but also preventing pandemics such as the COVID-19 pandemic, which has hit the world very severely. What we've seen over the past 50 years is that MAB is an innovative program which truly leads the fight in this field and provides a number of responses to the many contemporary issues we're facing. Now, the program has also many intergovernmental platforms as well as implementation frameworks such as the Seville Strategy from 1995, action plans as well. And recently, the MAB programme has technical guidelines for biosphere reserves, as well as a process of excellence to ensure that sites will continue to be quality references or quality benchmarks for the goals of the MAB programme. So the MAB community is managed, governed by documents and governance system, which have, over the past 50 years, enabled us to manage this project and get to where we are today. Now, lastly, I think that one of the specificities and the major achievements of the MAB is that we've been able to bring youth into the MAB programme through their active engagement and participation. And I believe that this is a real testimony to the sustainable future of this programme over the next few decades. So I think that's an overview of the major achievements of MAB over the past 50 years, Max. Thank you very much, Noeline. I think now perhaps we can move to the next speaker who will be starting this discussion.
Having set the scene of the program, I am delighted to welcome Dr. Jane Goodall, DB, founder of the Jane Goodall Institute and UN Messenger of Peace. I think that Dr. Jane Goodall is with us online, and I will ask my colleagues to kindly connect us with Dr. Jane Goodall. She should be on the screen in the few.
We're in live condition.
We are in live condition. I think we have some technical issues. So I will just remind who is Dr. Jane Goodall. Most of us know her. She is a world-renowned scientist. She's famous for her historic and groundbreaking work with chimpanzees. Much of her research was conducted in the region which is now the Gombe Masito Ugala Biosphere Reserve in Tanzania, and she started her work 60 years ago. The Jane Goodall Institute's humanitarian and environmental program, called Roots and Shoots, is active in more than 50 countries and empowers young people of all ages to become involved in hands-on projects to benefit the community, animals, and environment. Dr. Jane Goodall has inspired young people all over the world, millions of young people. And we are very grateful that she accepted to be the spokesperson to the 50th anniversary of the MAB programme. Without any further delay, I will ask my colleagues to screen the video on Dr. Jane Goodall, so we may have a better understanding of who she is and what she does.
Okay.
We are in live conditions.
Do you know a funny story or something to say?
May we have the video, please? I think it's coming now. It's coming. Thank you. Do we have now Dr. Goodall on the screen live, please? No? So maybe, Max, I will hand over to you. Et tu peux commencer peut-être.
Voilà.
Perhaps you could start by launching this discussion. Now, during our discussions at the words or discussions table.
I'll say.
Jane is here.
Jane is here.
We don't have the sound. We don't have the sound.
No, mais Jen, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Good morning, Dr. Goodall. We are delighted to have you with us.
Well, I'm sorry I'm late, but I didn't have the Zoom and all my team was not available. So I've been trying to get online for about half an hour.
Thank you for joining us. Thank you very much. We are delighted to have you here. And I know that a lot of people here are eager to hear from you, to hear your message to the MAB program for our 50th anniversary in your capacity of our spokesperson. So please give us your thoughts, and we are eager to hear from you. Thank you, Dr. Goodall.
Thank you. Thank you. And again, I apologize for being late, but I did not have the information. So I'm really delighted to be able to speak at this 50th anniversary of UNESCO's Man in the Biosphere Programme, which of course we all know as MAB, and fantastic it's coinciding with UNESCO's 75th anniversary. And of course for me and for the Jane Goodall Institute and all our people in Tanzania, it's very exciting. It was very exciting when Gombe Musito Agala Biosphere Reserve was created, I think 2 years ago. And Gombe National Park, of course, is where I started the long-term study of chimpanzees in 1960. And in 1960, the little tiny Gombe National Park on the eastern shore of Lake Tanganyika was part of what we called the equatorial forest belt stretching across Africa to the west coast from Western East Africa. And when I flew over in the late 80s, Gombe was just a little island of forest. It was a big shock. I knew there was deforestation. I had no idea the extent of it. So we began our JGI, Jane Goodall Institute's method of community-based conservation, which at that time was a new approach to working with the local communities. So with a small grant from the European Union, we picked a small team of local Tanzanians in the 12 villages around Gombe. And instead of a team of arrogant white people going into poor African villages, and there was great poverty, it was a team of people that they knew, local people. They didn't even have PhDs, sat down and listened to the local people and asked them what JGI could do to make their lives better. And that's where we began. And Tukari turned into a very holistic program. And it's this Tukari program that led to the creation of the MAB program in Gombe and what we call the Greater Gombe area around, and then the other parts of Tanzania contiguous to Gombe, where chimpanzees survive, not in any protected area, except for the 2 national parks, Gombe and Mahale, but in the village forest reserves. And these village forest reserves were being increasingly eroded as people cut down the trees to sell for timber, to make new fertile land, to grow crops to feed their growing families. And it was a very grim situation. But fortunately, our holistic program worked, and that, by the way, included scholarships to give girls a chance of higher education, family planning information eagerly received, because the villagers understood a way out of the extreme poverty they lived in was a good education, and they could not afford to educate the 8 to 10 children that was normal. We introduced microcredit financing so that particularly women could take out tiny loans to start their own small environmentally sustainable projects like a tree nursery. We improved the fertility of the soil without the use of chemicals. There were water management programs and agroforestry and permaculture. And gradually we introduced more and more innovations as the people came to trust us. Taught the people how to monitor their own forest reserves using smartphones. Introduced, thanks to Dr. Lilian Pintea, very cutting-edge geospatial technology. And we introduced into schools throughout the entire chimpanzee range. So we started with the 12 villages around Gombe National Park. We're now in 104 villages throughout the chimp range. There's no more than 2,000 chimps left in Tanzania. And in all of these villages, our youth program has been introduced, Roots and Shoots, which is a program involving young people. It began in Tanzania. It's now in 65 countries around the world, including in other countries in Africa where JGI works. And it's young people from kindergarten, university, and everything in between, as well as increasing numbers of young people, for example, in big business, who form their own Roots and Shoots groups, which act like kind of, environmental watchdogs in the companies where they work. And because we've worked with the people, because we've helped them to understand conservation and given them the tools to the health of their own forests, they've become our partners in conservation. Why? Because they understand that helping the environment, sustaining the environment, isn't just for wildlife, as conservation used to say to them, but for their future as well. And I think this approach is how we have managed to get village cooperation and support and partnership in villages in 6 other African countries where we work with chimpanzees. So this Tukari program, this working with the local people, as well as working with the local government, as well as working with central government, and choosing the right people on our teams, the right people who have the expertise and skill and know-how and sensitivity to work with local peasants on the one hand, and with government officials on the other. People who understand the tremendous importance of conservation in these villages and beyond. So I know that MAB has programs involving young people in the different biosphere reserves. Roots and Shoots grows because it's all about collaboration. We want to work with young people everywhere, And if there are programs in MAB programs, then Roots and Shoots is eager to collaborate so that together we can start to make even more difference. And that, as you all know, is so very important. We're living in these very, very dark times, politically, socially, and especially environmentally. We face the twin existential threats of climate change and biodiversity loss. And this was caused by our absolute disrespect of the natural world, of which we are part and on which we depend. Even if we live in the middle of a city, the air we breathe, the water we drink, the food we eat, everything, we are actually dependent on the natural world. But what we're dependent on is healthy ecosystems. And I learned in the rainforests of Gombe, and it's the same everywhere, that an ecosystem is comprised of interconnected plant and animal species, each one having a role to play. And as these species become extinct from that ecosystem, it's like pulling the threads from a beautiful tapestry of life. And if we pull enough threads, then that ecosystem will collapse. And that will be very damaging to the well-being of the people living around that area. So the time has come for more and more collaboration around the world. We were absolutely thrilled when UNESCO agreed to make Gombe and the whole area around Msito Ugala, the area of the chimps and the forests and the local people at that time living in poverty. We were thrilled to make this man on the biosphere. And at first, JGI tried to create a World Heritage Site, but that would have meant just Gombe. That was the only truly protected area where there were only 100 chimpanzees, and it wouldn't have worked. We have to work with the local people. And so that's why Man on the Biosphere was a perfect match for what we were doing to protect the chimps, their forests, and all other wildlife, and improve the well-being of the local populations. So that's really the message I have, except to say that, you know, so many people have lost hope. I don't think most people were very thrilled with the results of COP26, although there were high expectations. We wait to see how the pledges and commitments that were made will play out. But in the meantime, while we wait for that to happen, we have to do everything we can, because each one of us, every single day, makes an impact on the planet. And we get to choose what sort of impact we make. But that won't work in the long term until we alleviate poverty. Because if you're really poor, as I've said, you destroy the environment to get land to grow food, to make money from charcoal or selling timber. And in the urban areas, you buy the cheapest food. You can't afford, as we can, to ask if it harmed the environment, if it was cruel to animals like in factory farms, if it's cheap because of unfair wages in other countries, or even child slave labor. So there's the message, and congratulations on the Man and Biosphere's 75th anniversary. And I'm really proud to be able to speak on behalf of Msito Ugala, Gombe Msito Ugala Biosphere, and the Jane Goodall Institute on behalf of UNESCO. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Goodall. We'll now invite one of our young person, spokesperson of the MAB program, Mr. Obed from Mexico, I think, to Mexico, to come and to talk with you, because I think that we have been very happy to listen to you sharing your experience, your 60 years experience in Masita Ugala Gombe. So please, Obed, if you have something to ask, the floor is yours.
Claro, gracias.
Well, yes, thank you.
Hola, Jane.
Hello, Jane. First and foremost, I'd like to say it's a pleasure for me to be here with you, here in Paris, and here in contact with you, Jane. And I would like to send you a virtual hug, but also on behalf of all of the young people in all of the regions covered by the MAB programme, you are a source of inspiration. Everything that you have done, your background, your work. And really it's incredible. I believe that this work that you've carried out since the 60s is something that we should all be admirative of. And what I would like to ask you is linked to the theme of science, this kind of science, this very radical view of science. That is to say, the way that you were able to convince people to understand other people, other humans, let's say, other human beings, to really feel this other way of looking at life. And I believe that with the Roots and Shoots Institute, this is something that you have developed very well, this link. And I believe that there's also empathy that is really at the heart of this. So my question is, what happens when, let's say we don't run out of empathy, but what happens when we, let's say, have no more empathy? We can't go any further with the empathy. What do we do in that case?
Dr. Goodall, did you hear and did you have the translation in English?
No, I did not.
Okay,
I have
it's a
no
bit tricky.
button.
So
I don't know. I couldn't hear. I didn't understand.
Okay, maybe we can summarize the question
Yeah.
in English. You can summarize it? Or Marie? Marie, can you please or Dominique, can you please summarize the question for Jane? Luc is coming.
Sorry, I found the button now. The next time.
We'll translate for you, Jane. Don't worry.
No.
Well, I wanted to send you a warm hug. And my question is, what happens when empathy is no longer enough?
What do we do when empathy is not enough?
When what is no longer enough? What?
Empathy.
Empathy?
Yes.
Did you say empathy?
Empathy, yes.
Para la conservación.
For conservation, yes. For nature conservation. So what do you propose to do when empathy has reached its limits?
Empathy, you mean?
Empathy for nature.
Empathy for nature. Well, we must not allow it to reach its limits. We've got to work now. We've got to get together. That's why collaboration is so important. We've got to get more and more young people either working with our Roots and Shoots program, which is linking young people around the world, but linking them with other youth programs, working in collaboration with other youth programs and with adults too. All of us need to jump in now so that we don't reach the limit of the natural world, because if we do, we're doomed. And, you know, we don't have that big a window of time. So Mexico, actually, I was coming to Mexico when the pandemic broke out and that trip got cancelled, like all my other trips got cancelled. And but the situation, because of climate change and loss of biodiversity, is all over the world. And I was particularly moved during COP26 when the island nations came together and pleaded with the industrialized world to curb its emissions before it's too late for them, before their nations, their islands, their cultures vanish under the rising seas of the ocean. But the situation is very grim for people living in the unindustrialized world. And it's desperately important for the industrialized nations to live up to their commitments to the global south, to help them protect themselves against climate change. And so, to answer your question, we must not let it get to that stage. One of my greatest reasons for hope is the young people today, because when young people understand the problems and we listen to them and we empower them to take action, I can tell you, all around the world, young people are taking action. They're choosing projects that they choose to make the world a better place for animals, people, and the environment. And having chosen their projects, and in a group, they manage to pick on one of each of those areas. So the group as a whole is working for people, animals, and the environment. And they roll up their sleeves and they get out there and they take action. And because it's their project, they work with passion and energy. And when I talk to them and I see their enthusiasm, their determination, then I am really inspired that despite the closing window, we still have time to at least slow down climate change, to somehow find a way to stop the wealthy nations continuing to use coal and gas. And it was very disappointing at COP26 to see that the biggest lobbying group, hundreds, was for the oil and gas industry and coal.
Thank you. Thank you, Jane. I will now hand over to
Yes,
Max.
yeah. Thank you
and
very
please, Jane, remain with us because you are now going to another session. But
yeah, we'll organize at the end of the
Thank
event,
you.
we'll organize a debate and we'll invite you, if you have time, to maybe add something from you, from your experience, for feeding the conversation between the people. Thank you very much, Dr. Jane, and see you in a few moments. Je vais switch.
So now I'm going to switch to French. I'm going to explain what a radio person does. In fact, we racing against the clock. We had 7 minutes for the last session and we've used 30. So anyway, let's live with that reality and let's continue with that. That's what intergenerational dialogue is all about. We have sometimes some problems, but also solutions. So we're going to resolve the time one. So the first question is, what is the just place for human beings within our living world? And to let's say to launch this conversation, we'd like to show you a video which is on the EPOP network. It's a network that was created by Planet Radio, and it is active in 48 countries from around the world, and it is all about giving voice to people regarding their own life experiences. And this is it's an issue that is of a personality, or rather this is linked to somebody who comes from the Indian Ocean area. And indeed, here comes a message from Raymond Lucas. We hope that the video works. Let's see if it does. And the name of the video is Man is Capable. My name is Raymond Lucas. I am Creole Reunion and I'm 81 years old. in our community in the Aviron, we have a ravine that's called the Ruisseau, which is like the brook. But it doesn't work like it did before. It's drying up, and that is not something that is natural. It's extremely serious, and the consequences are very serious in the ravine. There used to be a lot of marine life, many fishes and other types of marine life, and they were there to help prevent the proliferation of mosquitoes. Today, now even in winter, we have mosquitoes. And now they are everywhere. They're in gardens, in houses, and there's no longer the predator there to keep them in check and to maintain the balance that once existed. So we are actually creating imbalances. We are suffering from massive attacks from mosquitoes. That means that people are using more and more insecticides to kill mosquitoes, but also other insects. And when they're killing insects, they're also killing birds as well. We need to really save or maintain the conditions of life that exist on this planet. It's really a matter of urgence. We need to count on people's common sense, popular common sense. Man is capable of taking ownership of his situation and being responsible. We need to make sure that we give information to people. We raise awareness. The consequences are serious. They are visible. And we need to make sure that we are conscious that birds and bees are dying. And if they die, then humans are next on the list. So, this is a video that came straight from the EPOP network. Mr. Luca in that video. Now, I'm speaking very quickly because we don't have that much time, but in order to participate in this intergenerational dialogue, we have two human beings, of course, who, through their experiences, have gathered some knowledge and some convictions, let's say, with regards to, and we hope that this will lead to a debate that is very convivial, and that we'll be able to transmit different information across generations. So I'd like to put your hands together, please, for Sebastião Salgado and Mrs. Alicia Donilan Baraklov.
Merci.
Merci à vous.
Thank you very much for being with us today. So, just to repeat the context a little bit, let's close our eyes. We're in a hotel. You don't know each other, and one thing leads to another with our conversation, and we start speaking about humanity, the future of humanity, perhaps, let's say, and then that's it. The conversation is launched. So maybe if you can present each other very quickly. So. You are Argentinian, Sebastián. You are, in fact, representative of an indigenous peoples group. What else can I say? You have. Oh, excuse me. Yes, you are a Maro. And Alicia, you are working at Biosphere Reserve in Norway. You are a researcher at the UNESCO Chair University of Bergen and a grassroots organizer. You are passionate about connecting people and nature through knowledge and practice. And you also work in a transversal way, a cross-cutting way, to inform practice in a way that is inclusive for people across the planet. And in fact, our first guest is actually Mr. Mauro Colagreso, who is a guide Michelin chef. So you have some ambitious projects right now, and I'm going to give you the floor. You're here in the hotel lobby, just speaking through this dialogue, and I would like to allow you to explain through this dialogue what, in your view, is the fair role, the fair place of human beings within our living world. You have 15 minutes.
But I think we will switch in Spanish, no? It's better for us.
Maybe we could do it in Spanish. Yeah, that's absolutely no problem at all. So thank you very much for inviting me to be here today. It's an honor, not only for me, but for representing all of those involved in MAB Youth programs across all of the Biosphere Reserves in the network. We were already speaking a little bit about this over a few snacks to speak about what we could perhaps share in this dialogue. Now, we've spoken a lot today about the role that human beings should play within our natural world, and we've heard a lot of inspirational people. As Jane was saying, life is like a web, let's say, a mosaic of different kind of experiences, and little by little we build it together, and we are part of this fabric, this web of life, and we have an important role to play. Right now I believe that we're in this moment of reflection about the role that we want to play in the natural world, and what is the story that we want to tell about our own role. And I know that, Mauro, you are a chef, but being a chef is, let's say, a cover, let's say, for your real passion, which is being a gardener. And this process of connecting with people through food, and there's also a story about the origins of the ecosystems that are actually nourishing us as human beings. This connection. I don't know if this has given you some kind of clues as to the role that we should play as human beings in this world. Well, yes, this is a vast question, let's say. I believe that the role that we as human beings should play is that of reconnection, let's say. We've spoken a lot about this idea of reconnecting with nature. And in my case, through my work on a daily basis, I'm confronted with a challenge, which is a very topical challenge, and one that is crucial for the future of human beings, and that's how we produce the food that we need to live. And every day I find myself faced with this issue, without having, let's say, the ability to act sometimes. But being involved in this field was something that changed me as a chef, and I realized that it's about more than just creating a meal for someone and satisfying their physiological needs, let's say. And I understood that through a dish, then you are actually transmitting something that goes beyond just a receipt. You are transmitting, for example, the love between a mother and a son, or a father and a daughter. And you're handing down knowledge. You're handing down knowledge about medicine, for example. You're handing down knowledge about the seasons. And all of this, let's say, strengthened my own links to the land. And this is where I found my place in the world. What can I do to contribute to creating a more balanced world? And I believe that the role of man right now, as part of this ecosystem, this beautiful world, our role is to ask ourselves, what can we do to make sure that everyone, at least in some way, can contribute to change? This change that needs to be imminent, and we cannot wait any longer. Well, as we were saying beforehand, looking at your background, your history, I believe it's very consistent with what you're saying. We all have a role to play, and everything that we do can, let's say, be the impetus for this change. And, you know, we have to think about what we can do, even in our work life and our private life, to contribute to this. Well, yes, taking tangible actions is important for the generations that are to come. So we're giving answers to people, so that we are changing our behavior. A concrete example is our restaurant, Mirasol, in 2019. We had all of the awards that you could imagine that could be handed out in the world of in the gastronomic world, let's say. But for me, what was the most important, the biggest source of pride, is that we got the plastic-free certification, and we were the first restaurant in the world to actually get that particular certification, so that particular certificate. What does that mean? It took us 4 years, in fact, to create a zero plastic restaurant. We were actually consuming 30,000 kilometers of plastic cling film a year, and you know that would be enough for me to get from here to Buenos Aires to go and see my father there. And indeed, we tried to reduce this tenfold, and it was really about understanding what we were doing and being aware of what we were doing. Now, this is something that we can no longer allow ourselves to do. We cannot fall into these traps anymore. In countries where we are lucky enough to have access to food on a daily basis, and where we, in fact, choosing what we can eat is actually a political stance that we are taking. We're thinking about the kind of world we want to hand down to our children. Every time we eat something, the way that we eat, where our food comes from, all of this is a way of protecting our planet. Well, yes, and for me, something I believe is very important is having the bravery, the courage, and the integrity to follow through on your beliefs. And sometimes that's something that's not very easy to do. And for young generations, like my own generation and younger than me, every day we wake up thinking about the future that's ahead of us. And so we need a lot of courage and integrity to face up to that. For example, if you're at university, then sometimes it's difficult just to get up in the morning and go out and do what you do, thinking about the challenge that you have ahead of you. So you really do need to have the strength to want to really make this change happen.
Be hard and it will hurt, no? El esfuerzo que tenemos.
So there's a lot of effort that is required. Now, of course, yes, we can be inspired by certain actions, but it's difficult to then follow through on that inspiration sometimes. Well, yes, I agree. And I believe that the message that we need to convey is a positive message, one of hope. The simple fact that our restaurant obtained this certificate meant that 400 other restaurants around the world got in touch to try and do the same, to try and set up the same kind of process for the same goal. And there are 150 restaurants that have actually been able to obtain this same certificate. So change is possible. And the message that we need to give to future generations needs to be a positive message, that we can change things. And we have no choice, in fact. It's the only path that we have.
Igual que en tu restaurante.
Yes, and also thinking about the fact that in your restaurant you've given a shining example that it is possible to bring around change, and that's also what we're trying to do through our Biosphere Reserves, where people can learn and become aware of what's going on in the natural world. So it kind of gives us a light to follow. It shows people the way. And we have a lot of responsibility when it comes to our kind of global shared responsibility of making our world a better place. Yes. Let's say that we have, through Biosphere Reserves, are oases of hope. And these oases are now multiplying across the world. And there are more and more people realizing that they are the seeds that can then grow into a bigger movement that creates thousands more seeds. And there's nothing more beautiful than the natural world. So we need to see how that we can react, the actions we can take, how we can change the course of things. In one of the projects that we have, we look at the issue of circular gastronomy. We speak about the circular economy, but not many people speak about circular gastronomy or feeding ourselves in a circular way. That is to say, taking into account biodiversity that exists on our planet and making sure that we are looking after our land, making sure that the way that our food is produced is environmentally friendly. And this is something that we as chefs in my industry are often a little bit distant from this world, but it's time for us to reconnect with this idea. Well, yes, I believe it was the representative of Costa Rica who said that it requires a change of heart. And I believe that this is another theme that is linked to that of reconnecting to nature. There are everyday ways of contributing without necessarily falling into the trap of trying to control our natural world. Yes, and as we heard from the doctor, it's about changing, a change of heart. Technology alone will not save us, and I believe that we have enough evidence to show us this. We don't have another world to move to, so we need to take care of this world. And the only way we can change it is going to be through a change of heart. Well, I think I have heard a wonderful idea to end on, and in fact we now have to move on to the next dialogue, and maybe later we will find ourselves at the round table where we can continue the discussion. So I say, see you later. Thank you.
Merci Alicia, merci.
Thank you very much, Alicia and Mauro. The second intergenerational dialogue, just to refresh your memories, including mine, is moving from individual awareness to collective transition. Which tools and strategies do we have available? Now that we have outlined our objectives, and if we base ourselves on the old adage, the end justifies the means, let's try to think of the means that will allow humans to not fall into the trap of individual awareness, which is often limited to an effect that only reaches those around him or her. In order to move towards a sustainable transition, to place humans at the heart of natural ecosystems, this will require a great deal of commitment and communication. So this next topic will be discussed in our next panel. But first, I'd like to just show you another video which was created by the EPOP network. This is a confession from very far away, from Central Africa. For those of you that are familiar with it, it's the Sanga Reserve between Africa and Central Africa and Cameroon. It's a message from a traditional chief who wished to share his sadness in the face of the loss of ancestral knowledge. We'll be discussing art with Vik later on. This video also discusses art. This is a video from Robert Sambo, who believes it's very sad to see these cultures disappearing. Here's the video. My name is Robert Sambo. I'm 57 years old. I was born in Berberati, but I come from a nearby community. I live in Bayanga, which is in the southern part of the Central African Republic. Today it's with a heavy heart that I want to talk to you about the culture of the Sanga Sanga and the Pygmies, which is disappearing. Recently, these cultures have undergone a radical transformation. Plastic jerry cans have become musical instruments, whereas in the past we had real drums. Pot lids, jerry cans, and plastic bottles. This is what people use nowadays for their festivities. They don't know how to make tam-tams and drums anymore. Unfortunately, the elders who had that know-how have passed away, and young people are no longer interested in making the drums. And that's why they resort to objects that are not valuable. The traders sell oil in these cans at the market, and as soon as they're empty, the young people take them to make them into tam-tam drums. The younger generation have turned away from the ancestral culture of tam-tam making and replaced them with these jerry cans. This is hugely regrettable because what will our children pass on in the future? It's very sad.
Voilà, merci d'avoir.
Thank you very much for listening to that message, which I believe is extremely important because it mentions the importance of preserving cultures and knowledge as well. Robert Sambo is the chair of the community radio that we set up with the pygmy community. Now, I know that we're not supposed to use the term pygmy, but that's the term that's used over there on the ground. Now, let's move on to the second intergenerational dialogue. I'd like to welcome on stage two people who, throughout their lives, have developed knowledge and ideas that they'll be able to discuss on the stage. Please welcome Mr. Anthony Johnston and Madam Rebecca Leibisch.
Rebecca, please. Anthony, sit down. Thank you very much for being with us. So the rules are exactly the same. You're in a hall, in a railway station, waiting for your train, and you have time to spend some minutes just for discussing about life and the future of the humanity. It's a huge discussion. Anthony, I'm going to present you in a few words. Donc, Anthony, vous êtes issu des Premières Nations de la communauté.
Anthony, you come from the First Nations Nayawak community in Canada. Recently signed the Nation-to-Nation Buffalo Treaty. You're involved in educational projects that aim at including traditional customs in the teaching classes of the University of Saskatoon. Rebecca, you are from Kenya. You're 25 years old. You were born and raised in Mount Elgin Biosphere Reserve. You have a bachelor's degree in human resource management from Moy University. You work for a youth-led group that focuses on biodiversity conservation in Mount Elgin Biosphere Reserve. You have carried out awareness campaigns within schools, so you're very committed to youth and you've been working with them at national and regional level. So Rebecca, young people go first. Now, I mentioned that you had undertaken a lot of awareness campaigning among young people. So what are the tools, Anthony, that we should be developing to foster this shift from individual consciousness, which is limited to our own close circle, to the collective transition? You have 10 minutes.
Thank you very much, Anthony. It's a pleasure to meet you this afternoon, and I'm really thrilled by the work you do and the input and the time you commit to the local communities and the indigenous people, and even young people in conservation. So I have 3 questions for you. But before that, I think I have something to offer you. I think this is well related with my African culture and also your culture. Thank you. Yeah. So we've been talking about connection of nature and how we human beings have actually, behave differently from how you people who are the beginners in the, who are the custodians of the traditional knowledge actually educated us. So we really find that we have lost the connection with the nature, and our impact to the planet is not only affecting us as young people, but even the generations that are yet to come. So my question is it possible to bring back this kind of connection, and what can be done to ensure that we continue with the traditional knowledge? Thank you.
We call ourselves Nehiyawak. In very simple English, that means Cree people. But at a higher level, it means that we strive to be complete people. So right now we're not complete, but a way that we'll become more complete is through reviving our language that's based on the land, that we learn from the land itself. So for a number of years, we've been working at reviving our language with our young people, our elementary and high school. And in the last few years, we base their schooling on the land and they learn from the land. So like many indigenous languages around the world, our language comes from the land. So to become more complete, we have to be on the land, learning from the land.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate how you speak from your heart and the passion that you have in conservation in general. So I can see that your years are old. You are really grown, and I base that also on your experience. And as young people, we really look up to you. So just to ask you, how is it possible to rally youth voices in conservation of biodiversity? I mean, like just a mass of youth from the global world, because the climate change is not affecting one region, but the world in general. Yeah.
As mentioned, our youth are learning from the land. They're learning about environmental matters, the climate change that we're all trying to deal with. In ancient times, when my ancestors made treaties with other tribes, our treaties were about sharing resources, sharing landscapes, and finding ways to work together. So our youth today in both of our schools are learning about climate and learning about treaties, what treaties meant to our ancestors. And when we made treaties, we made promises to one another with the Creator as witness. So we had to be true with our promises. So we had to be true to treaty. Recently, we've been talking with our young people about those two maybe different ideas, climate and treaties, and we hope that with knowledge about both, that it might spark the imagination in our young people to create a climate treaty. in which we all make individual and collective promises to land, water, sky.
Oh, really, I really appreciate that. Like, it is really important to educate young people, and more especially the kids and the youths, even at the young age, to learn to appreciate. And the way you put it in terms of trees, I really encourage the aspect whereby, like when counting our ages as young people or even the kids, like we plant trees to celebrate our birthdays, like just something to help the young people reconnect with nature and actually ensure that yeah, we are building a shared future for all lives on Earth. So that brings me to the last question I have for you. And that is, what threat does the depletion of biodiversity cause to the future generations? And what are the appropriate ways to mitigate this? Yeah.
The Mr. Bosses Nehiyawak, my ancestors, and like all Indigenous people around the world at one time, all of us here, all of our ancestors shared common belief that everything had spirit. All parts of land, water, and sky had spirits. The soil, the rock, the animals, the plants, all had a spirit. And that the human being was the weakest spirit because it needed everything else to provide for us. And I think, and that's partly why when we harvest animals, we make an offering. We give thanks for feeding us. And I think when we realize that we all have these connections to land, water, and sky, and we were able to understand and communicate and understand these other spirits that we've lost today. So we have to find ways to connect and have that respect for all other spirits that provide for us.
Oh, really? I'm really excited. The fact that...
I have a question for you.
Oh, yeah, I don't mind.
What can this old man do to help you?
Sorry? Oh,
What can this old man do to help you?
I really appreciate your advice, number one. I think that is really essential because I have a number of things I'll want to ask from you. But just seeing you speak from your heart is really inspiring on my part. And possibly I will wish to invite you to visit the Mount Elgon Biosphere Reserve someday and just come and share your work with the youths in my organization and see how we can pave way not only for the youths in Kenya, but in Africa and the world in general. Yeah, thank you.
And of course, you'll come and visit my community.
Oh, wow, thank you.
Thank you very much. It was so interesting. Thanks a lot. Can you please join us at the Table à Palabre? This is the place where everybody is supposed to talk for things and other things. This is what we call life. Thank you for being with us. So I'm maybe going to head in French, because I don't know. Okay, on va faire ça en français.
We'll speak in French.
Do you get your headphone? Okay, so I will do that in French, and for the one, and I try to speak French slowly, which is quite tricky for me. Alors, on est tous en train d'attendre nos trains à la...
So, imagine we're all waiting for our trains in the waiting room, so we'll try to pass the time. We'll draw on our discussions. They haven't all been intergenerational, but in any case, they are intercontinental. Vik, you presented your art earlier, and I felt like you were quite moved by the videos from the field. So, what do you think the role of art and artists is to facilitate this shift from individual consciousness and collective movement? How can art and artists facilitate that transition?
Can
I answer in English? it's easier for me.
You know, we have a structural problem right there in your question that comes from the fact that it has to do with the way we've learned to see the world. I've noticed in my humble perception of things that a lot of the problems that afflict humanity right now has to do with perception. And in fact, while we made an enormous development in the way we developed instruments, tools, to not only to learn, but also to describe the world that we live in, have put us in a position that right now we're kind of farther and farther away from the things that we're describing. You know, I don't know if I'm clear. When I was, I've always tempted, you know, since I was a kid, I was fascinated by images. Perhaps the first generation of artists that was born and raised under the spell of visual electronic media. But I lived in a place in my city that was borderline between a forest, the Cantareira mountain range, and a huge city of São Paulo, one of the largest cities in the world. And I was always in between these concepts. When I started making images, I felt somehow guilty about creating the very things that was separating me from direct experience. You see, I think this whole story begins, you know, maybe 75,000 years ago, as a man walks into a cave and he sees something that looks like a form that he's seen before. Not just any form, it looks like an animal. Not any animal, it looks like a bison, okay? Not any bison. It looks like the bison that he killed the winter before, and it was fed, the whole tribe fed in a huge feast, and it was amazing. And he had all these memories, these things were racing through his mind, and just a crack on a wall of a cave. And he went there and just did completed that form, maybe put a tail, maybe he put a horn on the animal. I don't know if bisons, though they have short horns, yeah. But by doing that, he created the first representation. And not only that had carried out that meaning to this first artist, but also when he called his tribesmen, his friends, they had access to the same feelings that he had. So it was something that could be shared. That was magical, you know, because when you think about it, through a representation, you can bring the image of a sun, of the sun, the star that's 8 light minutes from here, to just making a drawing, some lines radiating from it. It's very powerful magic, right? But 1 week later, a guy walks and sees the magic bison that evokes all these memories. And he says, it misses some color here, it misses a shadow, and he goes there and does that. So since then, the whole history of our relationship to the world as we live in, how we choose to represent it, you know, of language itself, has been like this chasing, like a cynicism or chasing technology. You know, whenever you see that something is not enough to actually to create an image in your head or to bring out this memory, because you become somehow immune to it, to that kind of image. New technology comes that makes the representation of the world more alive, more credible. And that's what it's been now from the Paleolithic time to now. And it's an evolution, but it has certain revolutions. So it had like the invention of perspective, and it has the invention of photography. And it's all be able to make a world that could be transmitted that was so much like the real world. And something happened about 20 years ago, and it's very present in our lives, that thick wall that separated what was inside the primitive mind and to the world that mind habitated, the world that it lives in, was polished by this technology until it became something very thin that could be held in your hand. It was a photograph. A photograph is actually perhaps the most important tool because at the same time it's a physical object, you can hold it in your hand, but also makes you have memories, affections, feelings, you know. But digital technology, but it's something physical and something psychic, something mental. Digital technology went to this thin membrane and just did pop. And everything became something of, like Leonardo once said, cosa mentale. Everything is something of the mind. And our greatest challenge right now, not that we didn't solve previous challenges, is actually to adapt to this new vision of the world. So we're right now in this sort of nihilistic moment where we don't have, we invested our story, both personal and collective, into a film, into a medium that is no longer proves anything. Sure. You know, for over 180 years right now. And then we have nothing to replace it yet. We're working on it. And at this very moment, you know, we have to deal with the world as it's, you know, systems are collapsing. Jane Goodall said something that was a twin threat. You know, depletion of the environment and biodiversity, also compromising biodiversity. But I think there is even a worse one, which has to do with the way we see the world, which is the depletion of us, what we would call it an atmosphere. It's we no longer have the hands-on, like you perfectly mentioned, we don't no longer learn from the land. We don't ever have this sort of a physical approach to it. And the education that we have available does not provide us that type of knowledge. I think we need a revolution in education, you know, so we can have to learn from the people who are still connected to it. I think one thing that I've learned, and especially by visiting indigenous people in Brazil, they do have that. They do have that, and they have different ways to transmit it. I think the greatest challenge of our time is actually to tap into their knowledge, which is evaporating as we speak. You know, these people are dying. They don't transmit the knowledge to youth. People have, you know, cable TV. They don't want to learn from their elders, and this knowledge is dying.
Because they got the time. They use the time for that. We don't do that actually.
Yeah, but I mean,
the using of time is very important.
The usage of time is different. But I think one of the greatest challenges, and my interest is so much is in environment as it is in education, is actually to promote a type of education that do not relate to native peoples as they. It's all us. You know, that differentiation, I think that the idea of alterity, when we talk about other people, especially people who are so much closer to the real issues than we are, we call them. This is the problem. We need an education that only has us as a major subject.
Vik, vous parlez de création.
Vik, you're talking about creations, image sharing, transmission. So I'd like to ask this question to Obed. You work a lot in social innovation programs, how to foster the participation of young people in this process of becoming aware. All of this world heritage that's been created, adopted, respected, and revered, how should we use it? Should we take all of it? Should we select what we keep and what we leave? Is everything good for taking? Well, I think that a lot of the interaction that's necessary between youth and the world around us must be based on sensitivity. We are conscious of where we are and what's surrounding us, and this is essential in order to make decisions about what we eat, what we wear. And this will allow us to take informed decisions, conscious decisions, by being aware and sensitive to what's around us. And I think the link that's been broken must be fixed. We need to recover that link. We need to strengthen it. And I think another important thing is that We need to understand that there's not just one language or one way of looking at the world. We can see it from a spiritual level, from an empathy-based approach, from science. But we need to understand that translations, just because there are different ways of thinking and speaking, it doesn't mean that they are less valid. They also exist, and I believe it can enrich our understanding of the world and what surrounds us, and what our role is in all of that. I think that all of us today have a great opportunity. We still have a wonderful world in terms of nature and biodiversity, and we're losing it. That's a fact, and we're running out of time. Either we act now, or it will be too late. So we shouldn't be hesitating here. There's no time for doubt. We shouldn't be hesitating whether we should act or not. We just need to act. And it's up to all of us, youth, adults, and children, to work together. Abed, I think you've put your finger on another important aspect, which is perception, how humans perceive elements that have been transmitted to them or not. Mau, I think you're working on a very direct link between human and nature, and that is food. It connects us on a regular basis with nature. So as a chef, as an owner of a restaurant, with all of the economic realities that entails, what do you want to keep from what has been transmitted to you by previous generations, not just your relatives, but humankind as a whole?
No.
I don't know if the microphone's working, says Mauro. Well, I think it's should be based on our relationship to products. That's what our relationship with nature is based on. In all of our fields, we're talking about the same thing, this lack of connection with nature, how we interpret the current world in a way that's sustainable. And I think we have a lot to learn from our ancestors, from elders. But there's good and bad there as well. We can also learn from their mistakes. We shouldn't be transmitting these mistakes. We should learn from them, because otherwise it would be foolish. And I truly believe and hope that humankind is not as foolish as it may seem sometimes. I hope that new generations, including ourselves, because we're responsible for what will be left to new generations who are asking for change, we need to be able to take a stand and look at what we're ready to sacrifice, in a sense, of our comfort, our comfortable lifestyles in Europe, in some parts of the world. We're part of the richest 8% of the world. So what are we willing to sacrifice? I think this is really a key question that we should all be asking ourselves. It's the only way that will ensure that we move towards action. And I apologize. I have a meeting at the doctor's that's been planned for a while now, so I might have to leave you. No need to apologize, says the moderator. It's been a pleasure to be here, says Mauro. Thank you very much, Mauro. Thanks for joining us and for taking part in these discussions.
Au revoir, à bientôt.
Thank you. See you soon, Mauro. So, Alicia, following on from what Mauro said, when he said that we don't have to keep everything, we also learn a lot from our errors. For young generations like your own, and for the other young people around this table, what should we not reproduce? What are the major events, let's say, that we should completely discard from the future so that we can reconnect with nature in the future?
Wow, what a big question.
Sorry for that.
That's okay. I was nodding my head because I think he pointed to something very important, which is, you know, that we all have to really reckon with how we live and what is a good life, and for, you know, the most privileged of us, you know, in the world, like this 8% that he was talking about, we really need to reckon with what we need to leave behind and how we need to really change the way that we live, you know, the developed world. What have we lost that we need to recover, like, you know, in terms of traditional knowledge, in terms of our connection to land, you know. And you were speaking before about how, you know, humanity has lost it, but I think some of humanity has lost it. and those of us who have need to find a way back, right? And we need to learn from those who still remember. So I think this kind of idea of a remembering and then going forward, you know. And I think this, I mean, I'm going to be a youth representative and say the hard things that people never say, like, you know, it's very much about power also, you know, like those in power need to leverage their power to really make the changes that are needed, because it's also not fair to put the responsibility on the least powerful to implement change. And unfortunately, it's the really powerful actors that need to leverage the you know, the big financial actors, the big
put a name on
the economic systems that we have, which focus on growth and which focus on capital accumulation, which focus on like resource extraction. Like this needs to change. Like, and for this to change, we need to really change what I was saying before, which is like, what is a good life? You know, what is it to live a good life in a good community, in a healthy community, in connection to land and connection to meaning? You know, does that mean, you know, what does wealth look like? And I think that this is something really central. You know, like we need to what is it about our economic system and our social system that is so incompatible with life? You know. And this is a big, you know, a lot of the big words that we tend to not say.
Yeah, sure.
But this is something that we need to reformulate, you know, and it can happen at so many levels, at the local level, the community level, but also at the global level. We need this, you know, reset.
Anthony, the human power is the biggest problem between humanity and nature.
Could you just repeat that?
I mean, is a human power, I mean, the power that Alicia was talking about a few seconds ago, is the power the biggest problem for increasing the best relation between human being and nature?
I think so, yes. As I explained earlier, at one time, ancient people all around the world believed that everything had a spirit. And again, the human was the weakest spirit. We have to make steps to return to that perspective and properly acknowledge everything that's provided for us.
Which could be, which step could be the first one for you? I mean, if we have to look behind and to refine the way, the best thing that they used to do before.
We are working towards returning bison that we call brother buffalo back to our lands. At one time on the Great Plains in North America, there were tens of millions of buffalo. They came to the point of extinction in the late 1800s. But in recent years, a number of First Nations in Canada and the States are looking at ways to bring buffalo back to our lands. And I believe, well, we're planning in maybe 2 or 3 years to bring back brother buffalo to Mr. Wass's Nehiyawak lands. And for our young people, that will bring the past to the present in the hopes for a good future. At one time, brother buffalo defined who we were as people, as a nation. And now today, our leaders talk about For us to move towards self-government, self-determination in the 21st century, we need Brother Buffalo beside us. Otherwise, we're not complete. We won't be complete.
Not just pictures of it, it's the real.
Exactly.
Merci, merci beaucoup. Thanks.
Thank you.
I'm so sorry, but we are in a hurry. I've received sign from UNESCO saying, stop, everything's closed. Oh, yeah, but the problem, do we have time for asking that question to Jane? Okay, cool. Okay, is Jane, are you still with us, doctor?
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah, Jane, it's really an honor, and thank you so much for listening in on us. And I think my question is just if you have a message for those of us who are young that are trying so hard and trying to keep hope. If you have just a message of hope from your experience of having seen things change so much since you began working.
Well, I think one reason why I have hope is because when I was a child, I lived through World War II, and here in the UK. And there was a while when England stood alone, helped by the soldiers, the armed forces of the colonies. But basically, the rest of Europe was overrun by the Nazi Germany. They were either defeated or they capitulated. And we had Churchill rousing the spirit of the British people, saying, we will not be defeated, until everybody had that spirit. And although it was impossible that we would stand against the might of the Nazi armed forces, we did. And I think somehow that colored the way I think about life. During that time, I learned to take nothing for granted. Everything was rationed. You didn't waste anything. I mean, we wore clothes until they wore out. And I've continued to lead my life that way. Not to the same extent, but I just don't take things for granted. And I think young people today in the affluent societies, it's not your fault if you take things for granted. You turn on a light switch and electric light comes on, you turn on a tap and water comes out. You expect 3 meals a day if you're in the way of eating 3 meals a day. And it's not your fault, because that's the way it's been since you were a small child. So hope is one of the most important attributes for now, because if we lose hope, we are doomed. And I'm seeing hope. I just wrote this book, The Book of Hope, but since I wrote that book, I've seen us as being in a very dark tunnel. And it is a dark tunnel, politically, socially, and environmentally. And at the end of that dark tunnel is a little speck of light. Well, we don't just sit at our end of the tunnel and say, I hope that light will come to us. We won't get there unless we work very hard and all together to crawl under, to climb over, to work around the obstacles that are in the way. All these obstacles that you all know about only too well. And finally, we get there. So hope is about action, not just about looking at the world through rose-colored spectacles. So my message of hope to young people, our Roots and Shoots program, and some of the things I've heard, I need to mention because they're in our Roots and Shoots program, because we bring young people from 65 countries together as much as we can, from different cultures, different countries, different religions. We try to bring them together, usually virtually, but occasionally we manage face-to-face. And they're all working on projects to help people, animals, and the environment because of its interrelatedness. But they're also learning that far more important than the color of our skin, our language, our country, our culture, or our religion is the fact we're all human beings. We are all one. And we are including the Indigenous people. We work with the Indigenous people. And we learn from the Indigenous people. Like in Tanzania, the culture was, and this is how things change, the culture was that for the medicine men, their knowledge was passed from father to son. That was the only way. But now we've managed to persuade them that because the world is changing, they need to share their knowledge. And so we've had workshops, and all these traditional healers have come out of the forests, and they've come together. They can't always speak the same language, but there are translators, and they're sharing their knowledge. So now the young people come to these meetings, and the young people are going into the forest to grow some of these traditional medicines, which you can't grow out of the forest. They need the forest network. And, you know, we're learning so much. We're learning so much. There's so much left to learn. And we can't lose hope. And I can't resist saying one thing. There was a talk about perception. Seeing the world in different ways is a problem. Well, we try to see the world in as many different ways as possible. But there are chimpanzees who've been taught sign language, and some of them love to draw. And this one young female, she was 4 years old, she loved to fill the paper with different colors and hand the drawing back to her teacher, who said, signed, thank you. So on this day, this chimpanzee just drew one line going up, down, up, down, up, handed it to the teacher. Teacher said, please finish this. The chimpanzee looked at it, handed it back, signed, finished. So after 2 or 3 goes of asking the chimp to finish the drawing, she asked, what is it? And do you know what the chimp signed back? She signed back a ball, a tennis ball, like she's drawn the bounce. So when we're thinking of perception, think of different ways of perception. And that story to me, I find a very, very significant story. So anyway, my message to young people is the same as our roots and shoots. When they come together at the end, we try to bring them, like in Africa, from different parts of the city or sometimes different parts of the country. And I found that they were coming together at the end of their session and saying, together we can, meaning we can save the world. And I said, yes, we can. We know what we need to do. We know all the different things. We have to protect forests, which are absorbing CO2. We have to clean up the oceans. We have to stop the intensive animal farming, which is absolutely destroying the environment, clearing areas to grow grain, to feed them, using fossil fuels to get it there. And these animals are all producing methane and a waste of water, changing vegetable to animal protein. We know the kind of things we need to do. We know the wealthy societies need to learn, live in a less exploiting way that exploits the nature less. We know we can't go on taking from the natural world the way we are doing, because already the finite natural resources in some places are running out. We know we have to control emissions. Islands are vanishing under the ocean. How do we get our leaders to change? Businesses are changing. Some governments are changing. But there's this pushback from some of the big corporations. We need a new relationship with the natural world, but we also need a new definition of success, not just money, wealth, and power, but leading a decent life, having enough to enjoy life, having enough time to go and reconnect with the natural world. And everything that's been said, I couldn't agree with more. When I'm out in the forest, I feel such a strong connection to a great spiritual power. And I came to the conclusion, which is shared by so many indigenous people, even before I knew about that in every little plant, every insect, every animal, there was a spark of this great spiritual power, the creator. And because we're human, we call that spark a soul. So if I have a soul, then so does a chimpanzee, so does a fly, so does the rocks. So I have agreed with so much that has been said. And to finish off the story of what the young people say at the end of their meetings now, I said, yes, we can. We know what to do. But do we have the courage, the strength, the willpower to actually do it? Will we do it? before it's too late. So now at the end of every meeting, and this is going all around the world, together we can, together we will. And I got a whole group of business people and CEOs and government people at Davos to stand up together and shout, together we can, together we will. And a reporter who reports on the government came up to me afterwards. He said, Jane, I had tears in my eyes. I never thought to see a group of people like that behaving as they did. So there is hope, but we must get together. We must have hope. Lose hope, we're doomed. We can do it. And let's together say we will before it's too late.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Dr. Jane. Thanks a lot for being with us. Now it's unfortunately time to close that wonderful session. I can't remind that wonderful sentence, which was, if we want to change things, we want to go up to changing the links and the relationship between nature and a human being. We have to get the hope, but without action, hope is nothing. Mix is good for getting this thing. Thanks a lot very much. Mesdames et messieurs,
ladies and gentlemen, thank you for following this debate, even with all of the technical difficulties that we had along the way. Thank you. I'm going to give the floor to Miriam to close this debate. And so thank you very much for your attention, and see you soon, perhaps on RFI Planet Radio, somewhere on our planet.
Merci beaucoup, vous m'entendez?
Thank you very much. You can all hear me? Yes? Excellent.
Très rapide.
I'm going to be very quick.
Du fond du cœur.
I would like to thank from the bottom of my heart Max Ball and Gaël as well, who from RFI have helped us since our meeting in Marseille. Thank you to Jane Goodall, if she's still connected, and all of my colleagues from the MAB, and Noeline, and all of the colleagues from the MAB Secretariat to come over here, Sima, Donara, Luc, because it's true that we're a family. So yes, please come up here.
Le relais tout de suite après.
So that way, there's one session left, in fact, and it's last but certainly not least, so there's one last thing to present to you, but it's our birthday today. It's our anniversary as a group, as MAB, and when we celebrate an anniversary, we sing, right? A birthday, we sing. So everyone together, please.
Toute l'équipe, hein?
The whole team, come up here, please. Isabel? Are you ready to sing?
On chante. On va.
Okay, off we go. So we wish ourselves a very happy anniversary. I believe that we all have a vision that is at the heart, the founding principle that is at the heart of this programme. I was lucky enough to meet Michel Baptiste, François Bridière, who are not here today, but they were the ones who brought this programme to life, and they turned that vision into actions. And indeed, there is, of course, this global network that that really does uphold all of the values of UNESCO. It's our anniversary, it's their anniversary, all our common anniversary. And we hope that we will have the audacity to believe that we can change the world together. And we hope that we will have the courage to listen from our hearts so that we can work together to go beyond barriers, beyond borders, beyond appearances. And in our everyday actions, through our words, to uphold the values of UNESCO, solidarity, for example, and to have the humility to listen to each other and work together, researchers, scientists, indigenous people around the world. And we hope we will be able to share meals together that have been cooked with love. And we hope that we will be able to celebrate life all together. And with the whole team here together, we're not going to sing a song to you right now, but at 6:30 we will we will do, so this is maybe the best teaser that you could hope for. So thank you very much. And I hand over to you for the last final words, Noeline. Thank you. So now we're going to move to the final part of our programme. We spoke about the future.
Du futur du MAB.
We spoke about the future of the MAB programme. But now I would like to present to you the programme for the future. The programme for the future of the MAB. And it is a programme that is very dear to me. And it's going to allow us to better understand the relation that we have with our closest cousins, that is chimpanzees. And this programme is a programme for monitoring the health of great apes. We are developing it now, and we hope we will be able to roll out this programme over the next, and then have it in place over the next 10 years in all of the biosphere reserves that have great apes. And I would like to invite Sabrina Krief from the National Museum of National Museum of Natural History, who is working with UNESCO as well as with the government of Uganda, so that we can set up this monitoring system. And this will be the future monitoring system for all biosphere reserves that have great apes. I'd like to give you the floor. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much, Noeline, for this introduction. First and foremost, I would like to wish you a very happy anniversary to the MAB programme. And indeed, it would appear that this is an anniversary that is being that has a heavy chimpanzee presence, let's say, with the inclusion of Jane Goodall, and we want to continue with concrete, tangible actions, just like Max was evoking. I don't know if the images are ready, but I wanted to present to you a project that we have developed over the last few months, or perhaps years, let's say, with the MAB team, and Noeline in particular, and it aims at monitoring the health of great apes through using drones, so that we can pool all of our results together and better protect these great apes. It's in fact a habitat monitoring project, not a health monitoring project. The interpreter corrects himself. So I don't know if we can go to the next slide. So here we can see the objective is to conserve the habitat of great apes, this indispensable habitat, which is that of tropical forests. We've seen just how important the link between forests and indigenous communities is, and how important it is, whether it be in terms of medicinal purposes. Jane Goodall spoke to us a little bit about this, when it comes to food, of course, and when it comes to ecosystems. We see that it's 1.6 billion people that actually depend on these reserves. In terms of biodiversity, it's also crucial, because 50% of all vertebrates on our planet are covered by this space, and over half of all plant life in the world. Now, unfortunately, this habitat, which is so important for us, is sought after for its resources, and its mining resources, also, of course, its wood. And we see that there are also issues related to land or soil erosion, the soil that is affected by certain types of farming practices, amongst others. And we've seen just how much forest land has disappeared. It's an extreme situation. And although agriculture was set up in a corner of Uganda around 5,000 years ago on a very small scale, now we see the relations between humans, forests, and the great apes. It's existed for so we know that the relationship has existed for a very long time, but what we are seeing today is a destruction of these habitats. And we see this is a real threat to these habitats and to the great apes. Now, these forest habitats are also perhaps a link between between our actions on the ground and our actions to fight against climate change, let's say. So, of the 7 types of great apes that we have, and they're out of the 500 primate species, let's remind ourselves that we are a primate species, and amongst these primate species, some of them have a particular intelligence, particularly high level of intelligence. And today we have 2 species of gorilla and 2 species of chimpanzee, and there's also bonobo as well, and different species of orangutan that are living in these habitats. Indeed, these apes act as a kind of barometer of the health of these forest areas, and they also help us to look at the future of these forests. And if they were to disappear, that would be a terrible thing for us as human beings. They have been disappearing, in fact, since Jane Goodall has work started. In 60 years, we see that 70% of these great ape species have disappeared from the planet. So our action is needed urgently. And even though we have had messages of hope today, and work being done on the ground with communities, let's say that a lot of projects do not actually bear that in mind. And although Biosphere Reserves are trying to show us the way, it's not the case in all of the habitats affected. So we need to work within this network that we have so that we can preserve the habitat of these great apes that are threatened by issues such as I mentioned, agriculture, but also civil wars, also poaching and illnesses as well. And often we know that there are mining and other types of forest exploitation actions that are carried out in these areas, not just poaching. Therefore, we need to look at these threats globally, and using drones is a way for us to try and resolve these issues so that we can... sorry, I think your telephone's going off there, Noeline. Through drones, we can try and improve the situation. Why? Because these tropical forests, even though they are being weakened and they are disappearing, they are still vast areas, isolated areas. It's often difficult to gain access to certain parts of these forests and to these great apes. And so often we have technical limits, also human limits, because we cannot go everywhere. We cannot have scientific data everywhere that can be harmonized in terms of the protocol that exists within or across our different networks. We've also spoken about some of the illegal activities that have been carried out that affect our fauna and flora. Ebola is also something that threatens not only humans but also great apes. And in order to have access to these forest areas in an indirect way, let's say, we can look at the forest cover and the habitat in general. That's extremely important. So the project that we are developing is to use 34 of the UNESCO sites that are home to great apes to try and develop a program and harmonize our practices so that we can develop a protocol. And UNESCO has recently established a network which will equip 19 biosphere reserves with drones. Those drones are ready to fly, and our goal is to strengthen this network, also building capacities and making sure that there are training programs, the first one of which will be set up in January in Uganda. And it will bring together some of the managers, the site managers, and in July there will also be another part of another group of managers, francophone managers on one hand, and then anglophone managers on the other hand. And to do all of this, we have set up a pilot project, let's say, to test the use of drones for these activities. And in particular, on our study site, where I've been working for 20 years in Kigali in Uganda. This is a difficult reserve to survey because there are many mountainous areas. And so the drones are really a very valuable resource so that we can actually study the forest canopy. And that helps us to have a wider access to these areas.
I'll show you some images on the screen. First of all, I'll tell you a bit about the project. The aim is to study the ecological distribution of the habitat, fruit trees as well, and also to learn more about the behavior of great apes. And it also aims to better understand the relationship between great apes and humans. So first and foremost, we'll be monitoring zones which are attractive for great apes, zones with lots of tree coverage. So here you can see we can study certain species of trees, identify them, and later give them a score which allows us to evaluate the attractivity for great apes, either in terms of the number of leaves or the number of fruits. Here you have a ficus, which has very few leaves, but or has lots of leaves but very few fruit. Now, in the next slide, you'll see an elephant next to the river. Now, elephants are key species for ecosystems, just like chimpanzees. They help these trees to grow, but they can also be an obstacle because they can be dangerous. So using drones is a way of allowing us to count the number of these mammals. We can also study other vertebrates, such as birds, which you'll see in the next slide. And this allows us to better understand the species and to count them as well. On the next slide, you can see the ficus I mentioned earlier, which is where the chimpanzees live. You can see small black dots on the picture. Those are chimpanzees. So we've been able to take pictures but also videos which allow us to study the distribution of these chimpanzees by moving around the tree. We wanted to find out the vertical and horizontal distribution of the tree. The dominant animals prefer the areas where the fruits are more ripe. So these will be areas where there's more sun, which means that the fruit have higher nutritional value and are sweeter. So we learn a lot from this about the behavior of great apes. Now on the next slide, you can see that the location of chimpanzees is also crucial in terms of their relationship with neighboring communities and indigenous communities. Here you can see chimpanzees in a maize field, which is in the middle of a eucalyptus crop and is close to a papyrus swamp. So, of course, locals can't stay all day guarding their fields. It could also be dangerous because there are elephants sometimes. So using drones allows us to warn villagers and farmers about the presence of chimpanzees so that they can shoo them away and ensure that their crops survive. It's also important to be able to work on a larger scale so that we can better identify and monitor zones of particular interest. So, for example, conservation areas. This allows us to see the state of corridors or forest areas that are particularly sensitive to certain pressures. And what we've seen with chimpanzees, but also more generally, It's important to monitor the borders of protected areas where wildlife lives, so that we can see whether the measures that are implemented to prevent conflict or limit conflict between humans and nature have been successful and are maintained. We have also been able to plan management plans for forests, because making paths in forests can have an impact on wildlife. We can decide, based on the coverage of forest, where we should make these paths, for example, and this will allow us to preserve the tree species that are threatened and to know which ones we should avoid cutting down. Now here you'll have a few more pictures just to illustrate what I'm talking about. The Kibali Park is on the border of crop fields, so the drones allow us to see the state of the trenches that have been dug to avoid elephants having an impact on the crops. So here you can see a 3-meter deep, 3-meter wide trench in the middle of the picture. Now, if we don't maintain these trenches, then elephants can cross the trenches, but so can chimpanzees and baboons. Another measure that we've implemented in the area that we're working in is enclosures made of beehives, because elephants are afraid of bees. So we connect these hives with cables. When someone touches the cable, then the beehives are shaken up and the bees come out of the hive. So this means that the animal flees. So what the drones do is really allow us to get closer to these areas and to monitor the trenches to make sure that no animals are crossing over them. So here you can see that when trees fall across the trench, then that means that primates can cross over. Another possibility is planned flights, which allows us weekly or monthly, depending on the protocol, to evaluate crops and to also look at alternative crops. So, for example, here you can see chili crops, which are a way of preventing animals from destroying the crops, because chimpanzees, baboons, and elephants alike do not like chili. Another option is replacing attractive crops by buffer zones, by planting crops that don't interest any of the animals living in the forest. We're also aiming at reducing pollution-related risks. Here you can see a tea plantation on the left, and on the right you can see a traditional tea crop. So the aim is to monitor these crops and to assess the growth and transformation of these areas. Today there are around 20 farmers who have joined us in discussions on organic farming. So agroforestry. Here you can see an agroforestry crop on the border of the park in Kahangi, and we hope that this model will be replicated. So the drones allow us to have an inventory of the diversity of plant species. This also applies to attractive crops. So, for example, maize. Here you can see a maize patch. And in the next slide, you can see this maize was planted for research purposes in a traditional manner. As you can see at the bottom, it's covered in imidacloprid, a neonicotinoid, which is used by local communities. And this allows us to prevent insects from attacking the crops. So we've been looking at introducing organic crops, and we've been carrying out tests on the effectiveness of each of these types of crops. So as you can see, in the organic method, there are fewer crops, but the crops are in better health. So we hope that over time we could achieve a greater yield for local communities. We've realized that there's a great risk related to pesticides. 30% of the chimpanzees we've studied have various different health afflictions.
Aux intrants chimiques est très importante.
So the risk caused by these chemicals is very severe. Baboons are also affected by them. Many baboons also suffer from facial malformations, and in the neighboring villages we've also seen health issues that could be related to these pesticides. So the aim is really to move towards much more methods that are much more respectful of human health and wildlife. So as I mentioned, there are benefits, but there are also drawbacks. So the aim is to overcome these drawbacks and to ensure that in the different study areas we can come up with suitable protocols in order to overcome any technical issues.
Dépasser donc ces problèmes techniques.
So that's our goal.
À mettre en place un protocole et un
to develop a protocol and a program that can be rolled out in the long term. As Noeline mentioned, our goal is to ensure that over the next 10 years we can have data on the 20 biosphere reserves, coordinate these programs, and also develop a database that will allow us not only to gather the data, but also to act accordingly, and through these networks to achieve results based on research, but also based on government policies that take into account the needs of local populations. So to conclude, I think that the pilot study has really shown the potential of this project, its effectiveness, and I believe that we're ready to launch the program now. Today is a real turning point, a landmark moment in this project, because we will be handing over some of the drones to Mr. Richard Hindou Oumarou, His Excellency Ambassador of Uganda to France, in order to implement and launch this project. Excellencies, thank you very much.
Merci Sabrina.
Thank you, Sabrina. I will ask the chair of the MAB ICC, Mr. Professor Adepoju. He is the chair of the MAB Council, but he also represents one of the beneficiary countries of this project. I'll ask him to hand over to Mr. Dourao, who is the ambassador of Uganda in France. The 3 drones for the 3 sites that will be monitored in Uganda: the National Park of Kibale, with the Sibitoli project that Sabrina is leading, but also the Queen Elizabeth Biosphere Reserve and the Bwindi National Park site, which is a heritage site.
distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of my delegation and on behalf of my country, Uganda, it is my pleasure to express our appreciation to UNESCO, which, in partnership with the Sebitoli Conservation Project, selected Uganda to host the training of technicians from the Great Apes ring states in monitoring the habitats of the apes. In a special way, allow me to thank Professor Sabrina Krief for the great collaboration we as an embassy have had with her. The government of Uganda greatly values its collaboration with UNESCO, and we render all the possible support for the training in the use of UAVs in monitoring the habitats of the great apes. Thank you for entrusting us with the delivery of the vehicles to Uganda. We are following up with the relevant institutions of government to grant permission for operating the machines in the country. I thank you all for your attention.
Thank you very much, Excellency. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now at the end of our first session. Before closing, I would like to thank our interpreters for the great job, for their patience, and really to help us to understand each other today. And we are very grateful for the time they have given to us. And please help me to thank them with a flood of applause. Thank you very much, and we gather again here at the same place at 6:30 p.m. for the last part of our celebration today. So I hope that we will meet again here at 6:30. Thank you very much. Thank you.